like a success story?
Yes, sellers. I would love a success story. Please give us one.
Basically, we have 8 Scrum teams. All of the Scrum teams are using Fitness for test automation. We've got 4 of those 8 teams are using Specification by Example, and basically we're going to be rolling Specification by Example out to the next set of teams. And I guess there probably are a lot of takeaways from there. I'd say probably the first one is we started off with Fitness before we went to Specification by Example. If I had to do it over again, we would quite frankly have adopted Specification by Example before we went with Fitness and a lot of the automation stuff.
It's interesting that you say that. By that, what do you mean, gherkin?
No, I mean truly the concept of having business specifications and using examples to illustrate those business specifications. The sort of the power of the communication, it just really the 2 things. One, there's incredible value doing that, even if you're doing manual testing. As a matter of fact, the teams that have adopted SBE do it for all of their user stories, all of their requirements, even the ones that we're supporting with manual testing. And quite frankly, it's a lot, I guess, lower cost and less risk than trying to launch a test automation effort. So it's like, it's not, hey, we're going to do this whole new thing. It's just, well, let's start talking about this in terms of examples. Give me a few examples. Let me write down what are your acceptance criteria, and I'll have examples for those acceptance criteria. And hey, yes, there's this complex script that we're doing to go off and test. We're doing exploratory testing, but here's a specification. Here are the concrete examples that we're going to be testing against.
Where do you keep your living spec?
We happen to keep our living spec in Fitness because we have a mix of automated and manual tests. As a matter of fact, it was interesting. When we started, we did not intend to keep our manual specs in Fitness, but the QA analysts were like, boy, this works better than the other tool we had at the time to keep track of tests. And part of it is this kind of another one of these big advantages, regardless of automation, whether you're using automation. When we went to Specification by Example, we got this concept of we separated the spec from the implementation of the test. So it's like everybody is interested in the spec, the examples, what it is. Very few people are interested in the detailed steps of the test. And you're absolutely right, those steps change over time. So all of a sudden, when those Fitness wiki pages were the business requirements and examples, everybody became very interested in that. As far as automation is concerned, I make a very pragmatic argument to the business. I'm like, look, you spent a lot of money for us to build a software that does certain things. Do you want us to make sure that software continues to do certain things? If not, no problem. We won't test it anymore. And maybe it'll do it, maybe it won't. Maybe our customers will call us up and tell us that it's no longer.
I've had a client that did lots of one-offs, one-off mobile apps that had no life.
Yeah.
They had no intention of supporting them. They had a definite end-of-life period where they turn them off. They weren't maintaining, they weren't enhancing them. They were given just a bunch of small little apps. And so they're not going to invest in automated testing. But so if you have something that you do want to live for,
we've got a slightly different situation. Okay, we've got a very large, complex system, over 2 million lines of code. We're software as a service. Our customers can decide that they no longer want to use our service. As a matter of fact, we have penalty clauses in our agreements with our customers. If there are key pieces of the software that are broken, they can't perform their business functions. So it is very costly to us to have defects, very valuable to us to make sure that the software, in fact, does what it wants to. And I think that that's a big takeaway, regardless of whether you do SBE or automation, is understand kind of what are the business drivers, what's the value, and make sure that you design a level of testing that's commensurate with the value of that. Yes, if you've got B2C consumer sites, if you've got systems that have got a very short shelf life, you've got users that are very tolerant to errors, then defects are not as expensive to you, testing is not as valuable. I would say the automation standpoint, don't dabble in it. Good test automation is software development.
So do it or don't.
Yeah. Well, actually,
Do
yes.
it well.
Yes.
Or don't.
Yes. Do it well, or realize that you're going to create record and playback scripts that have a very limited lifetime, and you're going to throw them away and recreate them as you go forward.
Okay, so what time is this? Are we supposed to end? Like about now? 9 o'clock?
No, about now.
About 9? So
About now.
about now. Now. So I am old and bald and hard of hearing. So maybe just a couple of questions, and then we'll have a book giveaway. So are there any questions? Yes, sir.
This might be tangential, but I was reading a book on iOS test-driven development, and one of the points that struck me was that your unit test should not involve a database or a network.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It was a little surprising to me,
Slows
but
it down.
I guess that's the way it is.
Yes, you write one little bitty test that's going to test one little bitty method at the small, tiny little method level, 2 or 3 lines of code kind of thing. And so any dependencies that it has, a good technique is to inject them into the code. So you don't test some code that depends on this, depends on this, depends on 20 other things, and finally depends on a database. I want to turn that all totally upside down and say, okay, if you depend on something, I want to give you maybe a mock that you depend on. So, yeah, that's very true.